On November 18, 1978, over 900 people died in Guyana, but the real horror started months earlier, in rehearsals. We've been told Jonestown ended in a single, spontaneous act of mass murder-suicide, a poisoning, a moment of collective madness triggered by Congressman Leo Ryan's visit. That's the story in every textbook, but I've read the testimonies myself, the ones investigators collected from survivors, and there's a thread running underneath that official account. Something deliberate, something practiced. Jim Jones didn't wake up on November 18th and decide to kill everyone. He'd been rehearsing it for months. What survivors called white nights were elaborate drills, fake emergency alerts that would pull the entire settlement from sleep in the middle of the night. Hundreds of people corralled into the central pavilion, the loudspeakers crackling, Jones's voice, steady and terrifying, telling them the enemy was coming. These weren't random drills, they had a purpose, a horrifying one. During each white night, Jones would hand out cups of liquid to his followers. Red liquid. He'd tell them it was cyanide. He'd say the CIA was closing in, that they had minutes to live. He'd watch their faces as they brought the cups to their lips. Some drank, others hesitated. Jones recorded their reactions. He was testing obedience. He was measuring who would follow him into death. The thing that gets to you when you read the survivor accounts, and I mean really gets to you, is the numbness in their words. One woman described drinking the liquid without thinking. Another said she felt her body go numb and accepted she was dying. Then nothing happened. The cup was empty. Jones would laugh. It was a test. It was always a test. The next night, they'd do it again. But here's where the official story starts to crack. Most histories treat the white nights as spontaneous panic, fear-based theater that Jones used to maintain control. That's partially true, but the specificity of what he was doing matters. He wasn't just testing obedience in the abstract. He was building a script. He was conditioning his followers to accept the idea that their death, sudden, communal, chemical, was inevitable and even righteous. Survivor testimonies describe Jones talking during these nights about revolutionary suicide. Not murder, suicide, a noble act, an escape from imperialism. The language was consistent, ritualized. He'd repeat it until the words became normal, until the idea of drinking poison together seemed less like death and more like transcendence. That's not spontaneous. That's psychological architecture. The White Nights also served another purpose that historians often overlook. They identified dissenters, people who refused to drink, people who questioned. Jones kept lists. He'd single them out afterward, humiliate them publicly, sometimes beat them. The drills weren't just rehearsals for death, they were loyalty purges. By November, the people left in Jonestown were the ones who'd proven, night after night, that they would comply. When Leo Ryan arrived on November 17th, he had no idea what he was walking into. He didn't know about the rehearsals. He didn't know that Jones had spent months conditioning nearly 1,000 people to accept communal death as their only option. Ryan thought he was visiting a remote agricultural commune. He thought he could talk people into leaving. He didn't understand he was stepping into the final act of a play that had already been written. That night, a handful of people did try to leave with Ryan. They'd seen something in him, a way out. But by then, the machinery was already in motion. Jones's guards shot Ryan at the airstrip. Within hours, Jones activated the final White Night. But this time there was no test. This time the liquid in the cups was real. What changed between the rehearsals and the reality? Almost nothing. The script was identical. The location was the same. The people were the same people who'd practiced their own deaths over and over. Jones didn't need to convince them anymore. He just needed to flip a switch. The rehearsals had already done the work. This reframing matters because it changes how we understand the tragedy. It wasn't a sudden outbreak of hysteria. It was the completion of a months-long process of psychological preparation. Jones didn't kill 900 people in a moment of desperation. He'd been killing them slowly, rehearsal by rehearsal, cup by cup, until the final act felt inevitable, until death seemed like the only logical choice. The implications are darker than we usually admit. It means the system worked exactly as Jones designed it. There was no moment of collective insanity we could have interrupted. The insanity was the process itself, the months of rehearsals, the cups of red liquid, the normalization of death. By the time the final night came, resistance wasn't possible. It had been engineered out of them. That's why the White Nights matter. They are not footnotes to the Jonestown story. They are the blueprint. They are proof that mass tragedy isn't always a moment of chaos. Sometimes it's the result of careful, systematic preparation. Sometimes it's a rehearsal that finally goes live, and by then it's too late to stop. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There's a new case every week where history gets rewritten by the details nobody talks about. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There's a new case every week where history gets rewritten by the details nobody talks about.